r/entitledparents. My neighbor wrote my obituary after I complained about noise. Hashtag my neighbor wrote my obituary after I complained about noise. I'll never forget the sound of my grandmother's voice breaking over the phone. "Baby, is this some kind of joke?" she whispered, and I could hear her crying in the background, my grandfather, probably holding her, asking what was wrong. I was sitting in the library, 3 days deep into writing my thesis for my master's program, surrounded by open textbooks and half-empty coffee cups, when my phone started buzzing like crazy. Text messages. Calls. More texts. I'd been ignoring it all because I was in the zone, finally getting the introduction section the way I needed it. When I saw it was Gran calling for the third time in 5 minutes, I knew something was wrong. "Gran. What's happening? Are you okay?" I asked, already gathering my stuff, my stomach doing that weird flip it does when you know bad news is coming. "Are you okay?" she demanded. "Why would you send us this? Why would you let people post this?" "Send you what?" "Gran, I don't know what you're talking about." She read it to me. Word for word. A full obituary. My obituary. In loving memory of my name, beloved scholar and cherished family member, who has passed away at the age of 28. Known for their dedication to academia and their kind heart, my name will be remembered by friends and family as a bright light in this world. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was sitting in the university library, very much alive, holding my phone with a shaking hand while my grandmother sobbed about my death. "Gran, I'm alive. I'm okay. I'm at the library right now. I don't know where this came from, but I promise you I'm fine." I was standing up now, people were looking at me. I didn't care. "Did someone send this to you?" "It's on Facebook," she said. "Your cousin shared it. She said she saw it posted by someone named, what was it, Frank. Do you know a Frank?" "Frank. My upstairs neighbor. The one I'd asked, very politely, to keep his music down during finals week." I have to back up for a second because I know what this sounds like. I know it sounds like I must have done something truly heinous to make someone this angry. But I genuinely didn't. I lived in a nice apartment complex, the kind with ivy on the brick and a small courtyard where people watered plants and said hello. I kept to myself. I was that person. I waved at neighbors, I didn't throw parties, I didn't blast music at 2 a.m. or have screaming arguments with my roommate, I didn't have a roommate. But Frank did scream. All the time. For 2 months, Frank had made my life a living hell with his noise. And I'm not exaggerating. He'd have friends over and they'd play music so loud my windows rattled. He'd jump around his apartment. Honestly, I'm not sure what he was doing up there, but it sounded like he was throwing furniture around and using each room as a landing pad. The worst part was the music. Heavy bass that came through my ceiling like a physical thing, vibrating through my skull at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. On weeknights. I'd left him 2 polite notes. Slipped them under his door. Very friendly. Something like, "Hey neighbor. I'm studying for my graduate exams. Would you mind keeping it down after 10 p.m.? Thanks so much." I even added smiley faces. Frank had thrown them back in the hallway, crumpled up. So 3 days before my thesis deadline, when his music was so loud I literally couldn't hear myself think, I went up there in person. I was nervous, I don't like confrontation, but I was also desperate. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, I could see he was maybe in his early 30s, with the kind of energy that immediately made me understand why he'd been so hostile to the notes. "Hi, my name," from downstairs. "I'm really sorry to bother you, but I'm in the middle of my graduate thesis and..." "Oh, you're the one leaving the notes," he said flatly. "Yeah, I'm sorry, the music is really loud and I have this deadline." He literally closed the door in my face. The music didn't stop. If anything, it got louder. I complained to the apartment management. They said they'd look into it. That was on Thursday. By Saturday, I was getting calls from my entire extended family. The obituary had been professionally formatted. Like, terrifyingly professional. It had my correct birth year, making me 28, mentioned my graduate program by name, referenced my specific university. It looked real. It looked verified. I later found out Frank had posted it on what he created as a fake Facebook account using my name, with a profile picture of me that he'd found online, and then he tagged it with different variations of my name to make sure it would spread. Then he'd sent screenshots of it to my family members directly. Just sent them messages with the obituary, no explanation. My professor, Dr. Chen, the one I was doing my thesis research under, had seen it. She'd almost removed me from my position with the research project because she thought I'd died. When she realized I was alive, she'd called me personally, confusion and concern all mixed together in her voice. "I didn't know what to think," she told me. "I almost sent flowers to your family." My phone was still buzzing. My sister had called. My mom had called. My dad had left a voicemail that was just him, breathing, clearly trying not to cry. I sat back down at the library table, still on the phone with my grandmother, trying to explain that yes, I was alive, no, I didn't know why someone would do this, and no, I had absolutely no idea what I was supposed to do about it. But I was about to find out. Because as upset as I was, I suddenly realized something. This wasn't a prank. This was serious. This was the kind of serious that required actual action. This was the kind of serious that was about to change everything. Hashtag chunk 2. The first thing I did, after I'd calmed my grandmother down and promised her at least 5 times that I was genuinely, actually alive, was go home and start documenting everything. I opened my laptop at my kitchen table and just sat there for a minute, staring at the blank screen. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. Frank's fake Facebook account was still up. The obituary was still visible on the timeline. And below it, in the comments section, there were dozens of messages. People I'd never met, expressing their condolences. Rest in peace. Too young. My thoughts are with the family. Someone had even shared it on a local grief support page. I screenshotted everything. Every single post, every comment, every message thread where Frank had sent the obituary to my family members individually. There were timestamps on all of it. Proof. Hard, cold, irrefutable proof that he'd done this deliberately, methodically, over what looked like the span of several hours on Saturday morning. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hey, it's your upstairs neighbor. Saw the fuss. People need to understand that noise complaints come with consequences. Maybe next time you'll think twice about calling management on me. P.S. You're welcome for the free publicity. I stared at that text for a long time. Then I screenshotted it. Then I started Googling. Identity fraud. Impersonation. Defamation. These were the words that kept coming up as I went down a rabbit hole of legal websites, my anxiety increasing with every article I read. Some of them said this could be a criminal matter. Others talked about civil lawsuits. One site mentioned emotional distress claims. By the time I looked up from my laptop, it was dark outside and I had 16 tabs open, each one making my heart beat a little faster. I called my mom. Oh, thank God, she said when she heard my voice, like she was expecting me to be calling from the grave. I've been a wreck all day. Your father is outside right now calling people. He thinks it might be identity theft. Why would someone do this? Who would do this? It's my neighbor, I said quietly. My upstairs neighbor. Frank. I complained about noise to the apartment management and he did this as revenge. The line went silent. Not the good kind of silence. The kind where you can feel someone's rage building on the other end of the phone. That's not a prank, my mom said finally, and her voice had gone cold in a way I'd never heard before. That's not a joke. That's, baby, have you called the police? Had I? No. The thought hadn't even fully formed in my head. This was something I had to handle, wasn't it? Some neighborhood dispute that had spiraled into something insane, but still, something between me and my neighbor. Something about the apartment complex. But my mom was right. This wasn't normal neighbor drama. This was something else entirely. I called the non-emergency police line that night and reported the incident. The officer who took my report, Officer Morrison, who was surprisingly patient given that I was rambling and barely coherent, said what I'd done constituted identity fraud and filing a false report, since apparently there were people who'd actually called local funeral homes asking about services. She said it could also potentially be harassment and defamation. She took down all my information and told me someone would follow up in 24 hours. The follow-up came the next morning, but not from the police. It came from my apartment complex's management office, and it was not what I expected. I got a call from Janet, the property manager, who I'd spoken to briefly about the noise complaints but had never really met in person. Her voice was professional but tight when she called me on Monday morning. I understand you've had some issues with a fellow resident, she said. Yes, Frank in 4B. He. Yes, well, Frank has also made some reports about you. I felt my stomach drop. What? What kind of reports? He's claiming you've been harassing him. That you've sent threatening messages and made false reports to us about noise violations to get him in trouble with management. That's not, I have the notes I left him. They're polite. I have. I'm aware of the situation with the social media account and the obituary, Janet interrupted. However, we're trying to handle this, delicately. Frank says he was upset about the noise complaints affecting his peace of mind and that he was trying to play a prank that got out of hand. A prank. He'd called it a prank. An obituary sent to my entire family, posted to fake accounts with my personal information, distributed to my workplace, a prank. Janet, he sent it to my professor. She thought I was dead. My grandmother was in tears. This isn't a prank. This is. I understand it's upsetting, she said, and her tone suggested she understood nothing of the sort. But we'd prefer if this could be resolved between you two without involving law enforcement. We really want to avoid any escalation. The word escalation hung in the air between us. He escalated it, I said quietly. I complained about noise. He wrote my obituary. How is that not escalation? What we're saying is that we value both of our residents' comfort and well-being. If we were to take formal action against Frank, it could create a hostile living environment. Tensions are already high. Perhaps it would be best if you considered whether you were comfortable remaining in the complex, or if you'd like to discuss breaking your lease early without penalty. I had to read that back in my head 3 times to make sure I was understanding her correctly. They were offering to let me out of my lease early, essentially asking me to leave, rather than actually addressing the behavior of the person who'd committed identity fraud against me. You're suggesting I move, I said slowly, because my neighbor committed identity fraud against me? We're not suggesting anything. We're offering you options. We'd hate to lose a resident, but we also understand that sometimes living situations don't work out. We just want everyone to be happy and safe. Safe. She'd used the word safe. The call ended shortly after that. I don't remember saying goodbye. I remember sitting in my kitchen, completely numb, staring at the phone in my hand. My neighborhood. My apartment. My lease, which I'd signed 2 years ago when I started my graduate program. My sanctuary, the quiet place where I was supposed to study and work on my research and build my career. And I was being offered an exit strategy instead of having the person who'd harassed me actually face consequences. That's when I realized something. Frank was counting on me being too nice, too conflict-averse, too eager to just make things go away. He was counting on me rolling over and disappearing. And I'd spent 28 years being exactly that kind of person. That stopped right now. #Chunk3. I made a list. Not a to-do list, those always felt manageable, finite. This was a strategy list. I wrote it in a Google Doc at 2 a.m. on Tuesday morning because I knew if I wrote it by hand, some part of me might still try to talk myself out of it. On a screen, in digital permanence, it felt real. Unchallengeable. 1. Get a lawyer. 2. File a police report, follow up. 3. Contact Frank's employer. 4. Document everything new. 5. Look into apartment complex liability. I'd never hired a lawyer before. I didn't know where to start. So I did what any anxious millennial would do. I Googled defamation attorney near me and started making calls before my brain could convince me I was overreacting. The first 3 law offices told me they specialized in larger cases. The fourth, a solo practitioner named Sarah Chen who worked out of a small office downtown, actually listened when I explained what happened. I could hear her typing as I talked. Identity fraud, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, she said, ticking off the charges like a grocery list. The emotional distress claim is actually your strongest one, given that you have documented proof of harm, your grandmother's distress, your professor's reaction. Did anyone else experience documented harm? My dad was calling funeral homes, I said. My professor almost dropped me from a research project. Even better. I'd need to review everything, all the screenshots, the texts, any communication with the police and the apartment management. I'll charge you a consultation fee to review the case, and then we can discuss whether a civil suit is viable. But I'll be honest with you, this is solid. This is actionable. The consultation fee made me wince. I was a graduate student. My stipend was barely enough to cover rent and groceries. But then I thought about what Frank had done, about him sitting in his apartment, methodically setting up fake accounts, crafting an obituary with my real name and details, and sending it out into the world like a bomb. He'd done it deliberately. He'd texted me about it afterward. He'd admitted it was revenge. That was worth the $300 consultation fee. I sent her everything that night. Every screenshot. Every text. Every email. And then I waited. The police follow-up came Wednesday morning. Officer Morrison, the same one I'd spoken to initially, called while I was in the middle of my research seminar. I had to excuse myself and take it in the hallway outside the lab. We've opened a formal investigation, she said. I wanted to give you a heads up that we'll likely be contacting your neighbor for a statement. We've determined that what he did constitutes filing a false report. There were 4 calls to funeral homes in your area asking about services for someone under your name. That alone is criminal. The identity fraud piece is more complex because he didn't actually steal anything material, but combined with a false report, we have grounds to move forward. So what happens now? I asked, pressing my forehead against the cool hallway wall. We'll interview him. If he doesn't cooperate, we can pursue charges. If he does and admits to it, the prosecutor will decide whether to file. Given that he sent you a text message basically bragging about it, I'd say you have a pretty strong case. After I hung up, I stood in that hallway for a long time, watching students flow past me like I was a stone in a river. I'd initiated something. A machine had started turning, and I didn't know how to stop it anymore, didn't even know if I wanted to. That's when I made the decision about Frank's employer. I'd never done anything like this before. It felt like crossing a line. But then I thought about what my mom had said, asterisk that's not a prank. That's not a joke, asterisk, and I found Frank's LinkedIn profile, public, because of course it was, clicked through to his company's website, and found the contact page for their HR department. I didn't write an angry email. I'd learned enough in the last 48 hours to know that angry emails could be used against me. Instead, I wrote something factual, detailed, and devastating in its calmness. Dear HR department. Asterisk, I'm writing to inform you that one of your employees, Frank, last name, who works in, department, at your, city, location, has engaged in behavior that may be of concern to your organization. On, date, Mr. Last name, created fake social media accounts in my name, posted a fabricated obituary, and distributed it to my family members, employer, and academic institution as an act of deliberate retaliation for a noise complaint I made to apartment management, asterisk. Asterisk, this behavior has been reported to law enforcement and documented extensively. I'm providing this information not to encourage any particular action, but to ensure your organization is aware that one of your employees has engaged in identity fraud and defamation, which may reflect on your company's values and hiring practices, asterisk. I have attached documentation of these incidents for your review. I attached everything. Screenshots. Timestamps. The text he'd sent me. And then I hit send before I could convince myself to delete it. It was 3 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. The machine was turning faster now. By Thursday morning, I'd received a response from HR asking for clarification and stating they'd be conducting an internal investigation. That's when everything got messy. Frank apparently contacted the apartment management again, this time claiming that I was harassing him by going to his employer, that I was escalating the situation, that I was making false claims about him to his workplace. Janet called me, again, asking if I'd contacted Frank's company about the incident. I informed his employer of a crime committed against me, I said, keeping my voice level. Yes. Is that illegal? No, but it's concerning from a conflict resolution standpoint. So is writing someone's obituary, I said. And yet here we are. There was a pause. Have you considered that maybe this neighborhood isn't the right fit for you? There it was again. The implication that I was the problem. That by defending myself, by taking action, I was somehow the one being unreasonable. No, I said firmly. I haven't. Because I didn't do anything wrong. I asked him to turn his music down. That's normal. What he did in response is not normal, and I'm not going to be driven out of my home because the management company is too conflict-averse to actually enforce their lease terms. No one is being driven anywhere. We're simply... Janet, I have to go, I interrupted. My lawyer will be in touch if there's anything else. I didn't actually have a timeline for my lawyer to call, but saying it felt powerful. It felt like I was finally taking up space instead of trying to be invisible. That night, I got an email from Sarah Chen with her initial assessment. The subject line was, strong case. We can win this. And for the first time in a week, I felt something other than fear. I felt ready for a fight. Hashtag chunk 4. The email from Sarah Chen arrived on Friday morning, and I read it 3 times before the words actually sank in. Strong case. We can win this, she'd written in the subject line, followed by a detailed breakdown of the civil suit strategy. She was confident. Genuinely confident. And somehow that terrified me more than any of it had before. Because winning meant this was real. Winning meant I was actually going to court. Winning meant Frank would know, already knew, probably, that I wasn't backing down. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee getting cold when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering, my heart already in my throat. Is this the person living at apartment 3B? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Who is this? This is Detective Patricia Norris with the police department. I'm calling to inform you that we've completed our preliminary investigation and will be bringing charges against your neighbor, Frank Middleton, for filing a false report and identity fraud. He's being notified today. The words felt both vindicating and immediately threatening. What does that mean for me? It means we're moving forward with prosecution. You may be called to testify, depending on how the case proceeds. I'll be sending you a document outlining the charges and next steps. Do not attempt to contact Mr. Middleton or discuss this investigation with him directly. Understood? Understood. After I hung up, I sat very still. Frank was being notified today. Frank knew where I lived. Frank had proven he was willing to do elaborate, premeditated things when he was angry. I texted my mom immediately, they're pressing charges. She called within seconds. Oh my God. Are you okay? Do you need us to come stay with you? I'm fine. They're telling him today. Then you lock your doors and you're careful. I'm serious. This man is unstable. I spent the next hour checking my apartment for things I'd never worried about before, all windows locked, deadbolt engaged, security chain in place. I realized I didn't have a peephole, I had to open the door to see who was outside. I made a mental note to ask management about that, knowing they'd probably refuse. By Friday afternoon, the fallout began. Frank's roommate, I didn't even know he had one until this moment, apparently ran into a mutual acquaintance at a coffee shop and mentioned that police had come to their apartment. The acquaintance told someone else. That someone else posted about it in our apartment complex's community Facebook group. Within 2 hours, my phone was blowing up. Hey, is it true there's a police investigation at our complex, from someone I'd never met in 3C? OMG, are you okay? From a girl who lived 2 buildings over and had spoken to me maybe once. Heard something crazy happened. DM me, from literally 3 different people. And then came the ones that made my stomach drop. That's the girl who got her neighbor arrested. She made a noise complaint and he got arrested for it. Seems like overkill. Actually, I heard she made a death threat to him first. That last one made me actually angry. A death threat. Where had that come from? I screenshotted it and sent it to Sarah Chen with a message. People are making stuff up on Facebook now. Her response was immediate, expected and unfortunate. Don't engage. Don't comment. Don't correct them. Every word you type can be used against you. Let the legal process speak. But it was everywhere now. By Saturday morning, the posts had multiplied. Some people were defending me, a noise complaint shouldn't result in police involvement versus actually writing someone's obituary is psychotic, and the debate was getting uglier. Someone had posted the apartment complex name and address. Someone else had linked to the complex reviews and posted vague comments about management covering up harassment. My professor, Dr. Chen, not the same Chen as my lawyer, which was confusing, emailed me asking if I was alright and whether the personal situation I'd mentioned would impact my attendance or work. She'd clearly seen something online. My dad called asking if I needed him to have a conversation with Frank, which I had to talk him out of very firmly. And then, Sunday evening, I found myself standing in the parking lot because I'd heard a noise, convinced it was Frank doing something, only to realize it was just someone getting groceries. I was getting paranoid. I hated it. The breakthrough, or breakdown, depending on how you looked at it, came Monday morning when Sarah Chen called with news. Frank's lawyer contacted me, she said without preamble. They're offering a settlement. He wants to drop the civil suit in exchange for a public apology posted to Facebook and $5,000. I nearly laughed. He wants me to accept an apology from the person who wrote my obituary. I know. It's insulting. But I wanted to run it by you because, and this is important, we have the criminal case, we have a strong civil case, but civil cases are unpredictable. Juries are unpredictable. Judges are unpredictable. A settlement means guaranteed money. It means closure. It means you don't have to testify or relive any of this in a courtroom. But it lets him off easy. It does. But it also protects you from the risk of a trial. I paced my apartment, phone pressed to my ear. What do you recommend? Personally, I think you should reject it. I think you should sue him for emotional distress and win. But I'm also your lawyer, not your conscience. This is your decision based on what you need right now. What I needed was for this to be over. What I needed was to feel safe in my own apartment again. What I needed was to not check the Facebook group constantly like some kind of digital masochist. But what I deserved was accountability. No, I said. Tell them no. I want to pursue the civil suit. There was a pause. Okay. Just so you understand, this means depositions, discovery, potentially a trial. This means more time, more stress, more of your life consumed by this. I know. And it means he'll know you rejected his offer. He'll probably escalate somehow, legally, not physically, but emotionally he's going to be angry. He's already angry. At least this way it's honest. After I hung up, I sat on my couch and realized my hands were shaking. I'd crossed another line. The line between defending myself and actively pursuing punishment. And I couldn't tell if I was doing the right thing or if I was just so angry that I was making it worse. That night, I lay awake listening to every noise in the complex, wondering which ones came from above, which ones meant Frank was still here, still my neighbor, still someone I had to share space with while we legally destroyed each other. #Chunk 5. The deposition was scheduled for 3 weeks out, which should have felt like enough time to prepare. It wasn't. Sarah Chen sent me a packet of documents the size of a small novel and scheduled 2 prep sessions, one to go over the questions Frank's lawyer would likely ask, and one to basically teach me how not to destroy my own case through emotion or sarcasm or any of the 100 ways I apparently had to be careful. The goal, she explained during our first prep session, sitting across from me in her office with her reading glasses perched on her nose, is to be boring. Sympathetic, but boring. You don't want to seem vindictive or exaggerated. You want to seem like a normal person who experienced something unreasonable and is now seeking reasonable compensation. But I'm not boring, I said. I'm angry. I know. That's the problem. She removed her glasses. Look, anger is justified. Your anger is completely justified. But a jury, if we get to a jury, doesn't want to punish someone because they annoyed an angry person. They want to compensate someone who is genuinely harmed and is seeking justice calmly. So for 3 weeks, I practiced being calm. I practiced not rolling my eyes when Sarah walked me through what Frank's lawyer would probably argue, that I'd been rude in my initial noise complaint, that I had no proof he'd acted maliciously, that it was just a prank that got out of hand. I practiced saying sentences like, I understand the defendant may have felt defensive, without my jaw clenching so hard I thought my teeth might crack. In those same 3 weeks, things got worse at the complex. It started small. My parking spot was taken twice, and when I got management to check the security footage, they said the person had parked there by mistake. That person was never identified. My mailbox was hit with something hard enough to slightly dent it, which management said could have happened anytime and wasn't worth investigating. A package I'd been expecting never arrived, and when I finally tracked it, it showed as delivered to recipient, but I never got it. Were these things Frank? I couldn't prove it. Sarah said not to jump to conclusions. But I knew. The way the mailbox was dented, deliberate. The parking spot thing, maybe coincidence, but 2 times. The package, I'd ordered it in my name, at my address, publicly visible to anyone in our complex. On day 16 of the 3 weeks, I was walking to my car in the morning and found a note under my windshield wiper. Just one word, written in careful block letters, liar. I took a photo and sent it to Sarah before I even sat down in my car. My hands were shaking as I drove to campus. She called me within an hour. Don't respond to it. Don't leave it on your car. Take it to the police and file a report for harassment. And forward me the photo. It's just a note. It could be anyone. It could be, but in the context of everything else, it's part of a pattern. Document it. Do you have a camera pointed at your car from your apartment? No. Management won't approve them. That needs to change. I'm going to send you a list of security measures I recommend you implement. Your landlord may push back on some, but will frame them as reasonable accommodations given the circumstances. The circumstances. That's what everyone was calling it now. Not harassment. Not intimidation. The circumstances. I got the note photographed and filed a report, and the officer who took it, not Detective Norris, but a younger guy who seemed vaguely skeptical, wrote it all down without much comment. Could be a lot of people, he said, which wasn't reassuring. By week 2 of prep sessions, I'd started having trouble sleeping again. Not the initial shock-induced insomnia, but something worse, the kind where I'd fall asleep and then jolt awake at 2 a.m., certain I'd heard something, and then I'd lie there for hours, listening to every creak and footstep above me, trying to decode whether it was Frank or someone else. I was at campus so much that my graduate advisor finally asked if everything was okay. I almost told him the truth, that my neighbor had written a fake obituary, that I was suing him, that I was slowly losing my mind waiting for a deposition that felt simultaneously too far away and too close, but instead I just said I was dealing with some personal stuff and it was fine. It wasn't fine. I was losing weight. My mom called and said I sounded thin, which isn't actually possible through a phone line but seemed to capture something true anyway. I was forgetting things. I showed up to a lab meeting with the wrong data. I found myself staring at my research with no idea what I was supposed to be doing. And then, in week 3, something shifted. I got an email from the apartment complex management. The subject line was, security concerns, review required. The email outlined that management had received multiple complaints from residents about aggressive behavior from tenant in 3B related to an ongoing dispute. The email said they were reviewing my lease for potential violations of the community conduct policy and would be scheduling a meeting with me to discuss the situation and its impact on other residents. I read it 4 times before the panic really set in. They're trying to evict me, I told Sarah, my voice high and weird in my own ears. Probably not, she said, but she was already typing something I could hear through the phone. Send me that email. And any other communications from management. But here's the thing, this might actually be good for us. How is an eviction notice good? It's not an eviction notice. It's a review. And if they try to evict you based on this situation, that's retaliatory, which is illegal when you have an open case against another tenant. But more importantly, it shows a pattern. It shows that Frank is escalating, using other avenues to hurt you. It shows desperation. It doesn't feel like I'm winning if I'm about to lose my apartment. You're not going to lose your apartment. Call management. Request that meeting. Be professional and calm, remember, boring and sympathetic, and just explain the situation. You'll be fine. I wasn't sure I believed her. But I called management, and I scheduled the meeting, and I tried to prepare for yet another conversation where I had to defend myself for the crime of asking someone to turn their music down. The deposition was now 10 days away, and I was running out of ways to convince myself that any of this would turn out okay. #Chunk6. The meeting with management was scheduled for a Tuesday at 2 p.m. in the main office, which was located in the complex's clubhouse, a beige building that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and contained a gym nobody used and a community room that hosted occasional potlucks. I'd been there exactly once before, when I first signed my lease. I dressed carefully that morning, which felt absurd but also necessary. Sarah had suggested professional but not aggressive clothing, which meant I was wearing the same blazer I'd worn to defend my thesis proposal and actual slacks instead of my usual jeans. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who was about to be evicted, which I guess I was, in a way. The office manager's name was Patricia, and she was a woman in her 60s with the kind of tight smile that suggested she was doing this against her own inclination. With her was a man I'd never seen before, introduced as management's representative from the corporate office. That wasn't good. We've had some concerns, Patricia began, and I felt my stomach drop. The corporate rep just watched me with his hands folded on the table. Several residents have mentioned feeling uncomfortable in the complex due to an ongoing dispute. What kind of dispute? I asked, even though I knew the answer. The situation with your neighbor, Patricia said carefully. Residents have reported seeing increased tension, and we've received messages from tenant 3B expressing concern about the safety and security of the complex. There it was. Frank had gone to management first, had positioned himself as the victim. My hands were shaking, so I pressed them flat against my thighs. I'm not sure what residents have reported, but the situation is that my neighbor posted a fake obituary about me, I said, keeping my voice level like Sarah had taught me. I reported it to the police, and I'm working with an attorney on the matter. I haven't done anything inappropriate in the complex. The corporate rep made a small noise, not quite a laugh, but something dismissive. We're not here to litigate who did what, he said. We're here to discuss whether the current living situation is tenable for all parties involved. My lease is current, I haven't violated any policies, and I'm a victim of harassment, I said. I'm entitled to live in my apartment without fear of retaliation. Of course, Patricia said quickly, shooting a look at the corporate rep, we're not suggesting otherwise. We just want to understand the scope of the situation. The scope is that my neighbor committed identity fraud and caused my family serious emotional distress. That's the scope. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes, during which they asked me questions about the nature of the conflict, whether there had been other incidents, and whether I'd considered alternative living arrangements. I answered everything carefully, remembered to breathe, didn't mention the note, the parking spots, the missing package. Sarah had been very clear, don't voluntarily provide information that makes you look paranoid. When it was over, the corporate rep said they'd look into the matter further and assured me that the complex was committed to maintaining a safe and peaceful environment for all residents. It was the kind of language that meant absolutely nothing and everything at once. I walked back to my apartment feeling hollowed out. That night, I called Sarah and told her about the meeting. She listened without interrupting, then said, this is actually fine. Better than fine, it's on record that management is aware of the situation and that you've explained it. If anything happens to your lease now, we have witnesses. They seemed like they wanted me gone. Maybe. Or maybe Frank's just good at playing the victim. Either way, you have 8 days until the deposition. We need to stay focused. 8 days. I could survive 8 days. I couldn't survive 8 days. On Wednesday, I got a call from my mother at 10 a.m., which meant something was wrong. My mother doesn't call during work hours. She works during work hours. She respects the sanctity of work hours. Honey, I got a call from your insurance company, she said without preamble. They said they were processing a claim for your death certificate. I almost had a heart attack. I felt the world tilt sideways. What? When? This morning. I called them back and said you weren't dead, obviously, and the woman looked into it and said someone had filed a claim listing you as deceased, with 3B as the reporting party. Frank. Of course. I filed a police report from here too, my mom said, and I could hear the anger in her voice, underneath the fear. I spoke to a detective. He's going to look into it. A second police report. A second state. Insurance fraud. This was escalating in ways I didn't have language for. I immediately called Sarah, who actually swore, the first time I'd heard her use profanity, which somehow made it worse. He's getting desperate, she said. Which is good for us legally but bad for you in the short term. This shows a pattern of escalation. It also shows that he knows he's losing. He's committing fraud. Multiple times. Yes. And each time, he's creating evidence that will help our case. But I didn't feel like I was winning. I felt like I was being hunted by someone who had nothing left to lose. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I sat in my apartment with all the lights on, watching my phone for the moment when something else would happen. I had a deposition in 7 days where I'd have to sit across from Frank's lawyer and a court reporter and a Frank himself, probably, and prove that I wasn't crazy for being afraid of my own neighbor. At 3 a.m., I texted Sarah, is this normal? The escalation. She responded at 6 a.m., which suggested she'd woken up at that hour specifically to answer, unfortunately, yes. People in legal trouble often lash out harder before they break. You're almost there. Don't do anything stupid. Stupid. As if I hadn't already been doing stupid things, like living my life, like asking for quiet, like thinking the legal system would help. I had 7 days to pull myself together. 7 days to become boring and sympathetic. 7 days to sit in a room with the man who'd written my obituary and not let him see how deeply he'd broken something in me that I wasn't sure could be fixed. 7 days sounded like forever. #chunk7. Friday morning, 3 days before the deposition, I woke to find a note slipped under my door. It wasn't in an envelope. It wasn't anonymous. It was written on a piece of printer paper in block letters, and it said, you're making a mistake. Withdraw the lawsuit or regret it. My hands shook as I held it. I immediately photographed it, texted the photo to Sarah with another one, and then sat on my kitchen floor for 10 minutes trying to remember how to breathe properly. Sarah called me within 5 minutes. Do not touch it again, she said. I'm sending you the address of the police station closest to you. You're going to go there right now, before work, and you're going to file another report. You're going to tell them about the note and about the insurance fraud and about everything. You're going to be calm and organized and you're going to make sure this is all on record. This is intimidation, I said, which was stupid because of course it was intimidation. Yes. Which is also illegal. Go. Now. I called my graduate program coordinator and told her I'd be late, a lie masquerading as the truth, since I had no intention of going to campus at all. Then I showered, got dressed in actual clothes instead of the oversized t-shirt I'd slept in, and drove to the police station with the note in a plastic bag that Sarah had instructed me to obtain without touching the paper further. The officer who took my statement was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 30s, with the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen worse things than notes under apartment doors. But he took it seriously. He documented everything, the note, the timeline, the previous reports. He explained that what Frank was doing constituted harassment and intimidation, and that combined with the insurance fraud, it was creating a pattern of criminal behavior. Have you considered a protective order? He asked. No, I said, and then immediately, should I? Might not be a bad idea, he said. Given the escalation. I can give you the information for filing one. A protective order. A legal barrier between me and my neighbor. The idea of it made me feel simultaneously safer and more terrified, because it would mean acknowledging, in front of a judge, that I was genuinely afraid of Frank. I was genuinely afraid of Frank. The officer printed me some forms and explained the process. I'd need to file a petition, request an emergency order, possibly go to a hearing. He told me to have all my documentation ready, the screenshots, the police reports, the note. Evidence of a pattern. The good news, he said, is that you've got plenty of evidence. Most people wait too long. Most people hope it'll stop on its own. I hadn't hoped it would stop on its own. I'd hoped that the legal system would stop it. But the legal system was slow and bureaucratic and seemed to operate on timelines that had nothing to do with the speed at which someone's life could unravel. I was back in my car by 11 a.m., sitting in the police station parking lot, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, with my area code. "This is Detective Morris with the City Police Department," a woman's voice said. "I'm calling about a report filed by your mother regarding insurance fraud. Do you have time to speak?" My mother. She'd filed a report in her state, and they'd somehow connected it to me and my state, and the detective was calling me directly. The system was working, or at least it was moving. I spent 40 minutes on the phone with Detective Morris, walking through the entire situation from the beginning. The noise complaint. The obituary. The family notifications. The missing package. The parking spot incidents. The note under the door. The insurance fraud. The management meeting. "That's quite a timeline," she said when I finished. "It feels like it's accelerating," I said. "That's actually common in cases like this," she said. "When someone realizes they're facing legal consequences, they often escalate their behavior. It's counterintuitive, but it's predictable. He's panicking. So the note means things are going to get worse before they get better. It means he's scared," she said. "But yes, the next few days could be rocky. Do you have somewhere else you could stay? Just as a precaution?" I didn't. I had Sarah. I had my parents 3 states away. I had my apartment, where I paid rent and had every right to live. "I can't leave my apartment," I said. "I understand. Just be extra vigilant. Don't engage with him. Document everything. And if anything else happens, anything at all, call the police immediately. Don't wait. Call." After I hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, looking at my apartment building from the parking lot. It looked normal. It looked like the place where I lived, where I'd been happy once, where I'd worked on my dissertation and made friends and hosted study groups. Now it looked like the place where I was being hunted. I couldn't stay in the car forever, so I went inside. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it. All the lights were off. The note I'd photographed was still on my kitchen counter in its plastic bag. I had 3 days until the deposition. 3 days until I had to sit in a room with Frank's lawyer and explain why I was afraid, why I'd called the police, why I'd had to file for a protective order that I still hadn't actually filed yet. I pulled up the protective order forms on my laptop and started reading. The language was dense and legalistic, full of terms like reasonable apprehension of bodily injury and course of conduct. I had to describe, in writing, why I believed Frank posed a threat to me. I had to quantify my fear in a way that would be persuasive to a judge. That night, I worked on the petition for 3 hours. I wrote about the obituary and the note and the insurance fraud. I wrote about my grandmother crying on the phone. I wrote about the way I now jumped every time I heard a sound in the hallway. I wrote about the fact that my neighbor knew where I lived and had demonstrated a willingness to lie about me, repeatedly, in ways that affected my family and my career. When I finished, I read it back to myself and felt sick. The words on the screen were true, and true things shouldn't make you feel sick, but they did. I sent it to Sarah, who called me back 10 minutes later. "File this tomorrow," she said. "Before the deposition. Get it filed and request the emergency order. Make it part of the official record. What if the judge denies it? Then we deal with it. But you need to try. You need to show that you've exhausted other remedies besides the lawsuit. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow I would file the petition that would make this all official in a way I wasn't ready for. Tomorrow I would tell a judge that I was afraid of my neighbor. Tonight, I would sit in my apartment with all the lights on and try very hard not to think about what the next 3 days might bring." #Chunk8. The courthouse smelled like industrial cleaner and old wood. I sat in the hallway outside Judge Patterson's chambers at 9:47 a.m., wearing the same navy blazer I'd worn to my graduate program interviews, clutching a folder that contained the evidence of my own persecution. Sarah sat beside me, her presence the only thing keeping me from dissolving into panic. "You're going to be fine," she said, for the 8th time. "You don't know that," I replied, also for the 8th time. At 10 a.m., a court officer called my name. I stood on shaking legs and walked into the judge's chambers. Judge Patterson was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the expression of someone who had seen enough human cruelty to be unimpressed by most of it. She gestured for me to sit. "I've reviewed your petition for a protective order," she said, not looking up from her papers. "Walk me through the most recent incident." I described the note. I described finding it under my door, the printed letters, the casual threat embedded in Frank's rage. I described calling the police, filing the report, the detective's call. I described Detective Morris telling me that escalation was predictable, that he was scared. Judge Patterson set down her pen and looked at me over her glasses. "You filed 2 police reports." "3, actually," I said. "One about the obituary and the social media harassment. One about the insurance fraud. One about the note. And you have documentation of all of this?" "Yes." "Show me." I opened my folder. Screenshots of the obituary. Screenshots of the messages sent to my family. The police report numbers. The email from the insurance company. The photograph of the note in its plastic bag. The message from apartment management about the previous complaints against Frank. The timeline I'd created showing the progression of his behavior. She reviewed everything slowly, methodically. She made notes. She didn't look up for 5 minutes, and those 5 minutes felt like years. Finally, she removed her glasses. I'm granting the emergency protective order, she said. Effective immediately. It will be valid for 14 days, pending a full hearing. You'll need to serve Mr. Chen with this order. The court will handle that, but you should be aware that he will know about it by end of business today. Relief flooded through me so intensely that I felt lightheaded. Additionally, Judge Patterson continued, I'm recommending that your apartment complex consider eviction proceedings based on the pattern of harassment documented here. That's not my jurisdiction, but I'm noting it in my order. The behavior described in these documents constitutes criminal harassment at minimum, and potentially aggravated harassment given the impact on your family members. Do you understand? Yes, I said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. The hard part is enforcing this. If he violates the order, if he contacts you, approaches you, leaves anything else under your door, you call the police immediately. You don't give him a chance. You don't try to handle it yourself. You call. I will. I walked out of the judge's chambers with the protective order in my hands, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Frank received the protective order that afternoon. I learned this from a text from my landlord. He's contesting the order. Hearing is scheduled for next Friday. Management is moving forward with eviction proceedings regardless. Next Friday. 6 days away. 6 days until I had to face Frank in front of a judge and explain why I was afraid of him while his lawyer tried to convince the court that I was exaggerating, that I was a difficult neighbor, that I'd started this by complaining about noise. But something had shifted. The invisible harassment had been made visible. The legal system was moving. The record existed. I made it through the deposition on Wednesday. Frank's lawyer was younger than I expected, with a sharply tailored suit and the kind of aggressive politeness that masked contempt. He asked me questions designed to make me sound unreasonable. Didn't I know that young people made noise? Didn't I know that complaints had to follow proper procedures? Wasn't it true that I was the one who'd escalated the situation by going to management instead of talking to him directly? Sarah objected to nearly every question. I answered carefully, sticking to facts. When he asked me why I decided to pursue legal action, I said, because my neighbor wrote a fake obituary about me and sent it to my family, and when I tried to address it through proper channels, he responded with threats and continued harassment. His face tightened. He didn't ask many more questions after that. The day before the protective order hearing, Detective Morris called me again. I wanted to give you a heads up, she said. We've referred the insurance fraud case to the DA's office. They're going to pursue charges. It's going to take a while, these things usually do, but it's moving. We've also identified 2 other tenants at your complex who filed complaints against him over the years, and both reported similar escalating harassment patterns. One moved out because of it. We've asked them both to be available for statements. So it's not just me. I asked, though I already knew the answer. It's definitely not just you, she confirmed. This is someone with a pattern of behavior. The court will take that seriously. The hearing was on Friday morning. I wore the same blazer. Frank wore a button-down shirt and an expression of righteous indignation. His lawyer argued that the protective order was excessive, that I was overreacting to a neighbor dispute, that young people were prone to drama. Judge Patterson listened to both sides. Then she looked at Frank directly. You created a fake obituary of your neighbor, she said. It wasn't a question. You sent it to her family members, causing her grandmother emotional distress. When that didn't have the desired effect, you escalated to insurance fraud and left threatening notes under her door. Is that an accurate summary? Frank's lawyer objected. Judge Patterson overruled him. Mr. Chen, I'm extending the protective order for 6 months. If you violate it, I will pursue contempt charges. You will have no contact with Ms. Name, directly or indirectly. You will not approach her residence, her vehicle, or her person. You will not communicate with her family or friends. You will not post anything about her on social media. You will not follow her. Do you understand? Frank's face had gone pale. He nodded. I need to hear you say it, the judge said. I understand, he said quietly. It was over. Not completely. The eviction proceedings would take months, the insurance fraud case would wind through the legal system, the hearing for the permanent protective order would happen down the road. But the acute phase was over. Frank had been officially declared a threat. The judge had said it, made it law, made it real. That night, I sat in my apartment with Sarah and my parents on a 3-way video call. My grandmother joined, her face on the screen smaller than the others but somehow the most important. I'm very glad you're alive, she said, which made me cry in a way I hadn't allowed myself to cry yet. Me too, Grandma, I said. The next morning, I woke up and realized I wasn't afraid to check my door. I wasn't afraid to walk to my car. I wasn't afraid to be in my own apartment. The fear hadn't disappeared entirely, maybe it never would, but it had shaped now, boundaries. It had been named and documented and addressed. My life, which had felt so small and constrained by Frank's behavior, suddenly felt like it could expand again. I had my dissertation. I had my family. I had my friends. I had my apartment, and my right to live in it in peace. I had survived this. I had done everything right, followed every procedure, refused to be silenced or intimidated into compliance. Frank would face consequences. The system, which had seemed so slow and ineffective, had actually worked. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen, I never would have chosen any of this at all. But it was an ending, and it was mine.